Where did the God of Israel come from? Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the earliest evidence of any kind that we have for the God of Israel comes from the name Israel, which means El contends, and would suggest that the Northwest Semitic patriarchal high deity, El or Elu, was the patron deity of Israel in its earliest periods. And the earliest evidence of any kind that we have for the existence of a people group named Israel is an inscription known as the Merneptah inscription, which dates to around 1208 to 1210 BCE, so right near the end of the Bronze Age. And this inscription talks about defeating some cities in and around Canaan, and then it talks about Israel and says, his seed is not. The idea is that they have completely destroyed this people. And this is an interesting part of this. When you look at the other cities that are mentioned around Israel, the inscription includes a determinative, which is a classifier for a noun, and those cities are identified as fortified or walled cities. But the determinative that is included with Israel is a determinative for a people. In other words, this was not a kingdom. This was not a capital city that ruled over a bunch of other land. It just seems to be the name of a people group. So they were probably not yet established with a capital city, with an administrative center, all of that kind of stuff. So the earliest reference we have to Israel probably identifies them as some kind of confederation of tribes or something like that. The notion that it identifies Israel wandering in the wilderness is not supported by any data. That's just an apologetic claim. We don't have anything regarding the God of Israel after that until around the middle to the end of the 9th century BCE, so around 300 years later. And then we have a few inscriptions pop up. One of them is the Mesha inscription. And this was written by the king of Moab, Mesha. And this is our earliest witness to narrative prose in an alphabetic script. But in this inscription, Mesha talks about conflicts with Israel, and particularly the son of the king Omri, part of the Omride dynasty. And Mesha talks about defeating Israel at Nebo and running off with the vessels of Adonai. And this is the first ever reference to Adonai as a divine name in reference to what appears to be the patron deity of Israel. And the other two inscriptions that are from around this time period are supportive of that interpretation. One of them is the Tel Dan stele, and this inscription was executed by an Aramaean named Hazael, who is boasting about defeating some kings of the nation of Israel, and then the house of David, which seems to be identified as a dynasty and not yet a kingdom. But the kings from both regions have Yahwistic theophoric elements in their names. In other words, their names include parts of the Tetragrammaton. They seem to be devoted to Adonai. And we have something similar in another inscription from Mesopotamia known as the Black Obelisk of Shalmaneser III, which talks about Jehu, a king whose name most likely has a Yahwistic theophoric element in it. And it talks about Jehu submitting to Shalmaneser III. And there is even a bas-relief that depicts Jehu iconographically bowing before the Mesopotamian ruler. So what this suggests is that between around 1208 BCE and around 850 or later BCE, the patron deity of Israel probably shifted from the patriarchal high deity El to Adonai. And while we can locate the patriarchal high deity El in other Northwest Semitic pantheons and inscriptions and literature and mythology, we have absolutely no reference to any deity named Adonai anywhere in any literature from anywhere near this time or place. So Adonai seems to be unique to the nations of Israel and then later Judah. Where did Adonai come from? When scholars try to date, at least relatively, the literary layers of the Hebrew Bible, the earliest references to Adonai seem to treat Adonai more as a storm deity than as a patriarchal high deity. And the storm deity is represented as youthful, as a warrior, as associated with inclement weather, with dark clouds, with thunder, lightning, flooding, that kind of stuff. And this matches up with the Northwest Semitic storm deity Baal, who is represented in the Ugaritic and other Northwest Semitic literature as one of the offspring of El, one of the second-tier deities in the Northwest Semitic pantheon. And in those earliest layers of the Hebrew Bible, the deity El is represented precisely in line with the Northwest Semitic conceptualization of El as the aged, wizened patriarchal high deity who sits on the throne. So the Bible seems to represent El and Adonai according to two different divine profiles that correspond to the divine profiles of two different deities from the broader Northwest Semitic pantheon. And there is a theory about how Adonai got introduced to Israel and not to all of the other pantheons surrounding Israel. There are two inscriptions from the early 14th and then the 13th centuries BCE in Egypt that rattle off the names of some people groups that occupy West Asia and the Arabian Peninsula. And they refer to most of these people groups as Shasu. And there are different groups of Shasu people. And one of these groups is identified as occupying the land of YHW, and then we have an Egyptian equivalent of a glottal stop. And a lot of scholars have argued that this name of this land or this people, it's still debated which it is. I think the consensus is moving in the direction of identifying this as the name of the land, is genetically linked with the divine name, but it is not yet a divine name. In other words, a group of Shasu people occupied a land that had a name that would later become the divine name Adonai. And some scholars speculate that this name of this land was attributed to their patron deity, who may have been an ancestral deity of some kind, a former chieftain or prominent figure who became divinized over time. And a part of this group migrated into the central or northern hill country and brought this deity with them. But in order to secure a place in the pantheon, they probably adopted one of the divine profiles of the local deities, and specifically Baal, the Northwest Semitic storm deity. This would explain why we know of no Adonai anywhere else in any West Asian pantheon, and it would explain why Adonai is suspiciously like Baal in their earliest representations, going so far as, for instance, in Psalm 29, seeming to appropriate a hymn that was probably dedicated to Baal and just replacing the name Baal with Adonai, or revising it in the direction of being dedicated to Adonai, even though the places that are mentioned in the poetry do not align with places that Israel occupied, but aligned with places that the Northwest Semitic storm deity Baal occupied. And so maybe this is how Adonai gets into the pantheon on the second tier, but is not yet identified with El. That was probably the result of some campaign of conflation that was taken by some king at some point who had either been a devotee of Adonai or decided to adopt devotion to Adonai in order to centralize or consolidate or expand their rule. And this is something that happens in the ancient world. Deities combine, sometimes temporarily, sometimes permanently. Usually they maintain both of their names, but sometimes not. And in this case, it appears that Adonai and El may have been conflated, and rather than maintain the knowledge of their distinction, that distinction was just obliterated, and Adonai became El became Adonai, and their two divine profiles began to merge. And this would have been useful for a king, because not only does it mean both of the groups of devotees are now under your authority, but also you now have a more interpretively flexible, a more utility patron deity. You need a benevolent and old and wise patriarchal deity? Yeah, Adonai is that. You need an angry, youthful warrior storm deity? Adonai is also that. You have a deity who can be a lot of different things. And then once you take Asherah, the consort, the wife, the partner of El, who then becomes the wife, consort, partner of Adonai, and then you later absorb that divine profile, then Adonai can become a nursing mother. And Adonai can be the one who ensures a safe and successful pregnancy, or can facilitate lactation and all these other things that we find not just in the stories of the Hebrew Bible, but in the personal names that we've uncovered written in Hebrew in this time period. So there are a bunch of ways that consolidating all these deities creates a kind of super deity who can respond to a variety of different circumstances and who can compete with the deities of the larger empires that are around you. It gets a lot more complex, but hopefully this is an interesting introduction to what some scholars think is going on with the origins of Adonai. You can find more about my theory in Adonai's Divine Images. This is an open access book you can freely access on the internet just by Googling the title. You can also get there through my bio. And good news, I've been trying for a while to gain permission to record an audiobook version of this book myself that will be freely available on the internet, and the publisher recently acquiesced to that. So I will be recording an audiobook of my book Adonai's Divine Images that will be freely available on the internet. I also highly recommend Mark Smith's book, God in Translation. This is a wonderful discussion about how Adonai relates to the other gods that are surrounding Israel. Robert Miller's book, Adonai, Origin of a Desert God, discusses what is known as the Kenite-Midianite hypothesis, an idea about Adonai originating among the Midianite tribes. That is an interesting discussion. We also have this edited volume, The Origins of Yahwism, that actually discuss a few different positions. Some folks date some of the traditions related to Adonai very, very early. Others date it very, very late. That is an interesting discussion of all the different theories. I think the most detailed book you're going to find is Ted Lewis's The Origin and Character of God, weighing in at over 1,000 pages. If you want to know where the scholarship stands on a lot of different issues related to Adonai, the God of Israel, that's the best discussion of that. And if you would like to learn more about those Egyptian inscriptions and how they may relate to the origins of Adonai's name, Daniel Fleming's book, Adonai Before Israel, Glimpses of History in a Divine Name, I think is a wonderful discussion, although it is inevitably a bit speculative just because we don't have enough data to draw very certain conclusions. I think this is the best available reconstruction of the origins of the God of Israel based on what data are available. And hopefully in the future, we will have a lot more data available. And the fit for this video has been Adonai and his Asherah.